Hello, my name's Marielle, and I woke up from a stroke in the ICU, barely able to move, barely able to speak, just in time to hear the nurse on the phone with my parents. And their words? Sorry, don't call us. They didn't come. They didn't check in. They left a note under a plastic cup. Hope you're stable. We're going on vacation. By the time I got home, my bedroom was empty, my furniture sold online, my name scrubbed off every legal document that once protected me. What kind of family prepares for your death and hopes you don't wake up? Would you still call them family? Because I did. Until they reminded me, I was easier to love unconscious. They told the hospital not to call them. That sentence kept circling in my mind like the slow, sterile beep of the monitor beside me. It wasn't loud, just steady, like it knew I needed the reminder to stay tethered. The nurse who said it was gone now, replaced by a younger woman with a soft southern drawl and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She moved efficiently, checking my IV, noting my vitals, never once meeting my gaze. "You're awake," she said, too flatly for it to mean anything. I tried to respond, but my throat felt like sandpaper, my lips cracked, and the muscles on the right side of my face twitched with effort. Nothing came out, just breath and humiliation. She offered a small cup with a bent straw. "Sip slow," she said. "You've had a stroke. You were out for a bit." How long is a bit? Days? Hours? I had no concept of time. My brain felt bruised, my body betrayed. I worked hard to form a question, my voice hoarse like it had been buried in gravel. "Did my family come?" She didn't answer at first. Her hand paused mid-air, adjusting the drip bag. Then she said it, like she'd practiced it. "Maybe they're just waiting until you're a little more stable." "Did they call?" She took a breath. "Let's focus on your recovery, all right?" That told me everything I needed to know. The room was ice cold, not physically, though the thin hospital gown did nothing to block the air, but emotionally. Every second of silence screamed louder than any answer she could have given me. My brain replayed the nurse's voice from earlier like a broken tape. "They said don't call anymore." I wasn't supposed to hear that. But I had. 3 days, maybe more, of nothing. No familiar voices, no hand on my shoulder. No one asking the nurse, "How is she?" No one even pretending. I closed my eyes, and what came to me wasn't shock. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. A horrible, awful kind of clarity I'd never wished for. They were gone. Sometime before dinner, another nurse came in. This one was brisk, chewing gum, clipboard under one arm. She swapped my water, refilled the plastic pitcher, and fluffed the pillow behind my back with mechanical precision. I said nothing. As she turned to go, I noticed something underneath the new water cup. A folded piece of paper. My pulse thudded in my ears. I reached for it, hands trembling, fingers barely strong enough to unfold it. It read, "Hope you're stable. We'll be out of state 10 days. Don't make this dramatic. VT. No love, no phone number. No, we'll check in soon, just a command disguised as a courtesy." 10 days. I stared at the handwriting. Vera's was always neat, sharp. Tobias had only added his initial. They hadn't even bothered to sign their names fully. I was nothing more than an obligation they were happy to put on hold. That note hit harder than the stroke. You don't know how deeply you're being erased until you see the space where your name used to be. Until your existence is summarized in 12 words, none of them loving. I looked at the signature again. VT. No mom, no dad, no, we're worried. I folded it back into a tight square and slid it under my tray table like it was contaminated. They planned this, or at least anticipated it. They were gone the moment it became inconvenient to be here. I had always assumed that no matter what, if something happened, they would show up. Because that's what family does. Especially when you've been the one showing up for them. Year after year, doctor's appointments, grocery runs, late-night drives when mom's blood sugar dropped or dad forgot where he parked at the grocery store. I was the one who gave up teaching art at the middle school, left my little rental in Greenville, and came back home to care for them. I did it without being asked. And this is how they repay me? I tried not to cry. Crying would mean I still expected something. Instead, I stared at the note until the words blurred, then fixed my eyes on the fluorescent lights above my bed. Cold, harsh, unforgiving, just like Vera. Time passed in hours that felt like months. Nurses came and went, machines beeped and buzzed. At some point, a hospital aide came to assist me to the restroom. My legs shook beneath me. I clutched the walker like it was the last honest thing in the room. That night, as I lay flat on the stiff hospital bed, the white noise of machines humming around me, one sentence repeated in my mind. Not like a scream, more like a whisper scratched into the inside of my skull. They told the hospital not to call them. They didn't want to be bothered, not even when I was one heartbeat away from disappearing. Not even when I was possibly dying. And that's when I started to feel it. Not sadness, not rage, but something new. A shift. A click. Like a door inside me slowly opening after being locked for too long. They had moved on. Now it was my turn, but someone had to know. Someone must have seen it happen, right? That thought kept me anchored through the next 3 days in the recovery wing. I had more questions than energy, and every answer I reached for seemed buried under layers of well-rehearsed silence. The nurses were kind, in the way people are when they feel sorry for you, but don't want to get involved. A smile here, a gentle pat on the arm there, but no one dared say anything meaningful. On the 4th morning, a social worker appeared. She knocked politely before stepping inside, clipboard in hand, and a smile too crisp to be sincere. "Mrs. Esteen," she began, "we're just updating some of your records. I need to verify your emergency contacts and insurance status before we finalize discharge." I nodded slowly. My voice still came out like a rasp. "Sure," she read off the screen. "So, currently listed emergency contact, Vera Malloy, secondary, Tobias Rake." I blinked. "That's not right." She looked back at me. "You're not listed anywhere on your parents' records either, just so you know. Their contact information was recently updated. You used to be the primary, correct?" "Yes," I said, sitting up straighter. "I was the one taking care of them. Until all this." She tilted her head, a trace of sympathy sneaking past her professional posture. "You may want to check with them. It looks like some things were legally changed while you were incapacitated." The air felt heavier suddenly, as if the room itself had shifted its allegiance. "When?" I asked, almost choking on the word. She glanced at the tablet again. "Looks like the documents were last updated 3 years ago, around the time of your hip surgery? Power of attorney, medical proxies, insurance beneficiaries." I laughed, quietly, bitterly. "I don't remember signing anything." She shrugged. "It happens. A lot of people sign things under sedation. Families say it's just for convenience, and then they erase you." I stopped listening. My brain was busy replaying every moment from that recovery. Vera, sitting at the edge of my hospital bed, saying things like, "Just sign this so we can pay the bills while you rest," or, "It's just a formality." She had planned this. This wasn't just a sibling spat or a misunderstanding. This was structured, methodical, documented. They didn't just leave me in that ICU. They set it up so if I didn't come back, no one would have to lift a finger. No funeral, no probate, just a signature and a quiet deletion. 3 days later, I was cleared to go home. No one showed up. The nurse who wheeled me out tried to make small talk. "You have a ride?" "No," I said. "They sent a transport van." The driver didn't say a word the whole ride. I didn't mind. I wasn't in the mood for conversation. I spent the 25 minutes staring out the window as we passed gas stations, church signs, and neighborhoods that looked too cheerful for what I was carrying inside. When we pulled up to the house, I hesitated before opening the door. I expected maybe Vera, or even Tobias, standing there with that nervous, overly rehearsed smile of his, but it wasn't either of them. It was a woman in a cleaning company polo shirt, holding a vacuum and a roll of trash bags. She looked up, startled. "Oh, they told me no one would be back until next week." I stepped out of the van, legs still unsure, heart steadier than expected. "This is my house," I said. She blinked. "You're Marielle?" I nodded. She shuffled aside. They said you were, I'm just here to clean out the guest room. Guest room. I didn't say a word as I walked past her into the house I'd grown up in. The smell was different, lemon cleaner and something artificial. The hallway felt wider, emptier. Pictures had been taken down. The art I'd hung was gone. Even the rug from the front hallway was rolled up and leaning against the wall. It wasn't until I reached the living room that I truly felt it. Everything personal was gone. The furniture had been rearranged. My books, gone. The Afghan my mother used to wrap around her knees while we watched old movies, vanished. In its place, a generic gray throw blanket from some home goods store. I turned the corner to the bedroom I'd been staying in for the past 2 years and froze. The closet was empty. Not sparse, empty. No clothes, no shoes, no storage bins. My jewelry box, the one from when I was 12, was sitting in a cardboard box by the door with a neon orange sticker on it. $5. Inside that same box, I saw my old scrapbook. The pages were torn out, the ones I had made about my parents' anniversaries, old family trips, school awards, gone, ripped clean. I sank to my knees, fingers brushing over the lid. On the fridge in the kitchen, someone had taped a note. Final item pickup, Friday. Garage door code changed. Final item pickup. Not person, not daughter, not caregiver. Item. I didn't cry. That's what still surprises me when I think back on it. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I didn't even tremble. I just stood there, one hand still resting on that damn box, and realized I had been replaced, not forgotten, replaced. They had made decisions in my absence, not out of grief or fear, but out of convenience. I had become a task they no longer needed, an extra line on a document, a drawer to be emptied. I sat on the bare floor of what used to be my room and stared at the window. It was open, letting in a breeze that moved nothing. Everything meaningful had already been taken. That night, I stayed in the house, alone. I didn't unpack. There was nothing to unpack. I just sat in the living room on a folding chair someone had left behind and watched the shadows crawl across the hardwood floor. I kept thinking about the note in the hospital, Vera's handwriting all crisp and controlled. Don't make this dramatic. As if quietly erasing someone was the rational thing to do. The next morning, I woke up sore and stiff, but clear-headed. I made myself some toast with the last of the bread in the pantry and sipped water from a chipped mug I found in the back of the cabinet. Then I opened my notebook. First page, top line, they didn't just leave. They replaced me. Second line, find out who else knew. But someone had to know. Someone must have seen it happen. Right? The morning after I scribbled those lines into my journal, I woke with a kind of dull ache pressing between my shoulders. It wasn't just physical, it was something heavier, like memory trying to crawl its way back to the surface. I shuffled down the hallway toward the kitchen, each step a little steadier than the day before. The sunlight coming through the front windows made everything look too bright, too fake, like a show home staged for buyers, one where no one ever actually lived. The house didn't smell like us anymore. Not like my mother's cinnamon tea or dad's cologne, or even the soft musk of old books and Sunday dinners. It smelled like chemical lemon and fresh paint. The kind of scent that screams we're covering something up. I wandered past the laundry room and stopped in front of the door to what used to be my bedroom. The small wooden plaque with my name, the one Dad carved by hand when I was in junior high, was gone. In its place was a brushed silver plate that read, "Guest." I didn't go inside. Not yet. Instead, I turned toward the living room and caught a glimpse of the mail stacked near the door. A few pieces had my name on them. Bills, insurance forms, even a card from a former student. But they were all stamped in red. Return to sender. One envelope had been opened, then sealed back with a piece of clear tape, like someone had changed their mind halfway through reading it. I picked it up and turned it in my hands, my heart thudding. Someone had decided I didn't live here anymore. I haven't just been ignored, I whispered to no one. I've been erased. The doorbell rang while I was still holding the envelope. I blinked, startled. I hadn't heard that sound in weeks, not in the hospital, not since I got back. I opened the door, expecting, what exactly? Vera? Tobias maybe, finally deciding to check in. Instead, it was a young woman with a ponytail tucked under a cleaning service cap. She had a vacuum cleaner in one hand and a tote bag full of supplies in the other. "Oh, hi," she said, clearly surprised to see me. They told me no one would be home until Monday." I raised an eyebrow. "They?" She glanced down at her clipboard, like that would save her. "Ms. Malloy and Mr. Rake said the house would be empty." Of course they did. "I'm Marielle," I said simply. "This is my home." She shifted awkwardly, suddenly unsure of whether to step inside or retreat. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I just clean here twice a week. I wasn't expecting anyone." "It's all right," I said. "You can come in. I won't get in your way." She hesitated, then stepped past me. "I'm Elena," she offered quietly. "I just started here a few months ago. Don't really know the family or anything." That much was obvious. Otherwise, she might have come armed with more than Windex and apologies. As she began setting up, I sat on the edge of the couch, the only piece of furniture that felt vaguely familiar, and watched her move. There was something skittish about the way she avoided eye contact, something practiced. When she headed down the hallway toward the bedrooms, I followed at a distance. "Elena?" I said gently. She stopped, turned. "Yes? Can I ask you something? Off the record." She looked at me warily but nodded. I took a breath. Did they ever say anything about me? About what they'd do if I didn't wake up? Her lips parted slightly, then pressed together in a thin line. "Elena, I need the truth." She hesitated, looked back toward the open front door, then toward me. Then she exhaled. "I probably shouldn't say this," she murmured. "But, yeah, I heard them talking. Once, I wasn't supposed to be in the room yet. They didn't know I was there." My hands clenched against the sides of my thighs. "What did they say?" She shifted her weight. "Your sister, she said, if you didn't pull through, it would make things easier. For everyone." My throat tightened. "She said it kind of like a joke, but it didn't sound like one. Your brother didn't disagree." I nodded slowly, as if that somehow made it easier to digest. "Thank you," I said quietly. She looked at me again, this time with something softer in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really am." After she left, I sat in the hallway for what felt like an hour. They had prepared for a future without me. Not out of mourning, not with grief or love, but with logistics. Like I was a line item they could check off if the outcome was convenient enough. At some point, I stood and tried to return to my room, but the hallway felt longer than I remembered. My knees buckled halfway through, and I found myself sliding to the floor, one hand gripping the doorknob of the linen closet just to keep upright. My vision blurred, my heart pounded. I felt the weight of everything, my body, my betrayal, the crushing realization that I'd been more valuable dead than alive. It wasn't just pain, it was humiliation, and I couldn't move fast enough to escape it. I crawled to my room, if you could still call it mine, and leaned against the wall, gasping. The hospital discharge folder was still tucked in my overnight bag, and I grabbed it like it could anchor me. I sat there, pressing the manila edge against my forehead like it might bleed answers through skin. They had planned a world I wasn't meant to wake up in, and I had the nerve to survive it. As the sunlight faded and the room slipped into shadows, memories started creeping back. Not whole ones, just slivers. That hip surgery. I had been loopy from anesthesia. Vera had come by, sat beside me, smiling that tense, efficient smile of hers. She had a folder. "Just insurance stuff," she'd said. "Sign here so we can keep the bills moving." I signed. I was half asleep. There hadn't been a lawyer, no one to explain what was in front of me, just Vera, a pen, and her cold reassurance that she'd take care of things. "What did I sign?" I whispered aloud. "What did they take?" It wasn't just money. It was power, ownership, the right to be the one who made choices when I couldn't speak. And they had turned that right into permission to forget me. By nightfall, the house was silent again. Too quiet. Even the appliances seemed to hum with hesitation. I took out my journal and flipped to a blank page. With hands that still trembled slightly, I wrote one line. They were waiting for me to vanish. I won't. It started with the sound of her heels. That sharp, deliberate rhythm on the hardwood was impossible to mistake. No knock, no warning, just Vera, letting herself in like this house still belonged to her, and maybe, legally, it did. But she wasn't walking into a space. And she was walking into a battlefield. I didn't move from the kitchen. I'd been slicing an apple, mostly to give my hands something to do. When I heard the front door creak open and the clack of her shoes coming closer, I didn't pause. I just kept slicing, thin and steady, until the blade kissed the cutting board in a slow, satisfying rhythm of its own. "I thought I'd find you here," she called out like we were still on speaking terms. I glanced up as she entered, looking every bit the polished Charleston philanthropist, linen slacks, cashmere shawl, hair twisted into a bun that didn't dare loosen itself without permission. She held a small paper bag in one hand and a decorative tin in the other. "I brought you some herbal tea," she said with a bright, forced tone. "And a lavender candle. Thought you might need something calming." I nodded toward the counter without a word. She set them down like she was dropping off charity and expected gratitude in return. "I didn't think you'd be back so soon," she added, tone still sunny, but eyes scanning the room as if auditing it. "They said you'd need longer in rehab." "They said a lot of things," I murmured, not bothering to look up. She laughed, too quickly. "Well, you look good. Thin, but good." Thin, because nothing says you matter like a backhanded compliment tied in a bow of diet culture. I finally turned to face her fully. "Why are you here, Vera?" She blinked, feigning innocence. "To check on you. I'm your sister." "No," I said. "You're someone who left a 10-word note when I was unconscious in ICU. That doesn't make you a sister. That makes you an investor checking in on your risk." Her smile tightened, lips pressing together. "I thought you'd be more gracious," she replied. "I thought you'd be more honest." We sat at the table out of habit, not comfort. I poured 2 mugs of plain black tea, not the herbal blend she brought, and slid one across the table toward her. She didn't touch it. I took a sip of mine and studied her. Vera always played her part well. She wore concern like jewelry, visible, polished, but cold to the touch. "I've noticed the changes in the house," I said, keeping my tone even. "No more photos. My room's labeled guest. Even the mailbox has been updated." She tilted her head. "We thought it would help, ease the transition." "For who?" She didn't answer. "You moved through my things," I continued. "Decided what was worth keeping. What was worth $5 at a garage sale. What wasn't worth anything at all." "You're being dramatic." I leaned forward slightly. "Don't tell me how to feel in a house I was erased from." Her jaw tensed. "I didn't erase you. I protected the family." "There it is," I whispered. "That word. Protected." Vera crossed her arms. "You weren't exactly in a position to make decisions. And yet, here I am," I said. "Alive, speaking, asking." There was a pause, a beat too long. I didn't blink when I asked, "Did you sign anything? On my behalf?" She looked down at her perfectly manicured nails. "Only what was best for everyone." I waited. "You weren't exactly aware. After your surgery, you remember how foggy you were. You even told me to handle things." "I told you to bring me a blanket," I snapped. "Not transfer control of my life." She shrugged. "Details." That word hit like a slap. "I've spoken with the hospital," I said. "They're looking into the records." For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. It wasn't fear. Not yet. But it was something less confident than usual. "I just want to understand," I said. "Why? Why go to these lengths? Why rewrite me out of the picture?" Vera stood, adjusting her coat. The mask of compassion was slipping. "You've always been the one slowing everyone down, Mayor," she said. "Always. The one who took too long to choose a college. The one who stayed close to home while the rest of us did something with our lives. The one who never quite figured it out." She smoothed a crease in her sleeve. "Maybe this," she added, gesturing vaguely toward my healing body, Was life catching up? That sentence didn't land by accident. It was sharpened, curated, delivered like a gift wrapped in cruelty. I didn't flinch. I stood too, met her gaze, let the silence settle before I spoke. If I was such a burden, I said slowly, why go through the trouble of erasing me? She opened her mouth, but I kept going. Because you needed me gone, but not dead. You needed me out of the way, quietly, legally, without mess. That way, you could keep the image without the inconvenience. Her expression shifted, a flicker of annoyance, then the quick recalibration back to neutrality. I came here to offer support, she said. No, you came here to check if I was still a threat. She reached for her bag, but I stepped toward the door. I'll walk you out. As we approached the front steps, she paused, tried to reach for a hug. Reflexively, I stepped back. Thanks for the tea, I said. Next time, don't forget the poison. I opened the door and waited. She walked out, head high, spine stiff. She didn't turn around. I locked the door behind her. They wanted me compliant. They forgot I remember everything. It had been 2 days since Vera showed up unannounced, dropped a candle and a veiled insult on my kitchen counter, and walked out like she still owned the place. The scent of lavender still lingered faintly, though I had tossed the candle in the trash an hour after she left. The tea, I poured it straight down the drain. I spent the next morning sorting through old mail that had somehow found its way back into the house. Some of it was mine. Some, I realized, had been redirected and reopened. Credit card offers, hospital follow-ups, even a few alumni newsletters from my college. Most of it was addressed to me, but had fingerprints that weren't mine. That afternoon, I received a text from Tobias. Let's not make this ugly. Vera and I have a solution. Can we talk? I didn't reply right away. I stared at the message, reread it 5 times, then placed the phone face down on the table. The next morning, I said yes. We agreed on a neutral location, a little cafe tucked on the edge of downtown Charleston. Not too crowded, not too private, a place where you could smile while being gutted, and no one would notice. When I arrived, Tobias was already there, seated at a small table near the window, staring into a black coffee like it held some kind of moral compass. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered, grayer around the temples, still polished, though, still the family's favorite middleman. I approached slowly, and he stood to greet me. Marielle, he said with a tight smile. You look better. Recovered, I replied flatly, taking my seat, at least on the outside. He nodded, sat down, and fiddled with a small folder resting beside his cup. We danced around small talk for a moment. Weather, traffic, some vague comment about how spring came early this year, but I didn't let it stretch long. So, I said, cutting the air between us, what's this solution you mentioned? Tobias cleared his throat. I know things got a little messy, and I get it. You're upset, but this doesn't have to stay ugly. That depends, I said, on how much uglier it can get. He forced a chuckle. Look, Vera and I, we just want peace. Closure. We want everyone to feel like they can move forward. And you think I'm what's holding that up? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he opened the folder and slid it across the table. Inside were a set of typed documents, neatly stapled, professionally worded, cold. There's a property on the east side, he said. Nice neighborhood, quiet, newly remodeled. We can transfer the deed to your name. Full ownership. No strings attached. I raised an eyebrow. A condo? Yes, and some financial support to go along with it. Enough to help you get settled, start fresh. Vera's already spoken to her accountant. And what's in it for you? He paused. Just peace of mind. For everyone. I leaned back in my chair. The breeze outside shifted slightly, brushing against the glass with just enough weight to make me notice. You rewrote me out of the family, I said, voice steady. And now you're offering me a consolation prize like a timeshare exit clause. Tobias sighed. That's not fair, isn't it? This is just easier, Marielle, for all of us. Easier for you, I corrected. so you don't have to answer uncomfortable questions, so Vera doesn't have to worry about legal pushback, so Mom and Dad can pretend I just moved on. His eyes dropped to the table. You think I didn't notice? I said. The erased pictures, the reassigned mail, the new locks, the furniture missing. You all didn't plan for me to come back. You were hoping I wouldn't. He looked like he wanted to argue, but knew better. Instead, he lifted his coffee and took a long sip. I closed the folder and slid it back toward him. I'm not for sale, Tobias. He rubbed his temple. You're being difficult. No, I said. I'm finally being honest. A long silence passed between us. People around us clinked their spoons, murmured about pastry specials, typed on laptops. Life went on. That's what betrayal always counts on, being swallowed by the noise of ordinary things. He looked up again. You don't have to make this harder than it already is. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. You know what the problem is? I said. You all treated me like the quiet one, the helper, the background character. And maybe I was for a long time. But here's what you forgot. I'm the one who paid attention. He stiffened. I'm the one who listened when Mom vented about Vera's trust fund slipping, when Dad muttered about missed payments, when you borrowed money and promised you'd pay it back after that job in Savannah. His mouth opened, then closed again. I stood, reached into my purse, pulled out a $10 bill, and laid it beside my untouched coffee. I'm not taking the condo, I'm not taking the money, and I'm not going anywhere. I looked him square in the eye. If you thought I'd go quietly, then you've forgotten I was the only one who ever listened. I turned to leave, then stopped and glanced back over my shoulder. Now I'm the one who remembers. Tobias didn't follow me out. He didn't call after me. He didn't even try to apologize. He just sat there, still as stone, staring at the folder like it might rewrite itself if he wished hard enough. I didn't sleep the night after that meeting with Tobias. Not really. I laid on top of the covers in a sweatshirt I hadn't washed in days, a pen tucked behind my ear and a legal pad on my chest like a shield. I kept picturing him, sitting in that cafe, his face calm, collected, sliding the condo paperwork across the table like it was a napkin and not a muzzle. But I knew one thing he didn't. I wasn't going to vanish. Not this time. By 6:30 the next morning, I was already dressed, seated at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I barely sipped. I opened my laptop, fingers moving slow at first, then faster. I knew exactly where to begin. Luther Penn. He was the only name that came to mind. I hadn't spoken to him in over 20 years, not since high school, when we'd been paired together on the debate team, and Vera used to call him Luther the Loser behind his back. I remembered defending him once in the hallway. Vera had rolled her eyes and muttered, "You always pick the wrong side." Now, maybe the wrong side was the only side left with a conscience. It took less than 10 minutes to find his office listed online, Penn Legal Services, North Charleston, tucked between a tax prep shop and a used tire outlet, but still standing, still open. I called. A woman answered. "Penn Legal, how can I help you?" "I'm looking for Luther Penn." He may not remember me. It's Marielle Esteen. From a long time ago." There was a pause. Then a man's voice came through. Familiar, but older, rougher. "Marielle?" "Yes." "Come in today," he said without hesitation. "You're not the first person to call me about her." That stopped me cold. "About who?" "You already know." He gave me the address and a time. Noon. I spent the rest of the morning collecting everything I had. Discharge forms from the hospital, the mail that had been returned to sender, photos I'd taken of the garage sale box with my jewelry priced at $5. I even ripped out the pages of my journal where I'd noted everything that had changed, every date, every memory that suddenly didn't line up with what I was being told. At 11:15, I left the house. Traffic was light. The weather was mild, not hot enough to sweat, but warm enough to crack the windows. Luther's office looked exactly how it sounded. Modest. A second-floor unit above a laundromat with buzzing fluorescent lights and a humming vending machine in the hall. His door was slightly ajar. He stood when I entered, a little taller than I remembered, broader, wearing a shirt with rolled sleeves and a tie that didn't quite match. "Marielle," he said, offering his hand. "You look like hell." I laughed, for the first time in days. "Thank you. I feel worse." He gestured for me to sit. "You brought paperwork?" I nodded and placed it all on his desk. He began to sift through it in silence, flipping pages, pausing now and then to make a note. He reached the hospital file and pulled out one particular sheet. "This is the power of attorney," he said, tapping the paper. "It was filed 3 years ago." "During my hip surgery," I replied. "I barely remember anything from that week." He nodded. "That's common, and they took advantage of it. This wasn't notarized, no witnesses, no legal advisement. It's flimsy." "But they used it," I said, "to sell my belongings, change my address, transfer accounts." He set the paper down. "It's illegal, but they were betting you wouldn't question it, that you'd stay compliant." "Or that I wouldn't survive?" He didn't answer that. He didn't have to. We spent an hour going over what I needed to do next. He offered to file for a motion to suspend the POA and reinstate my rights. It would take a few days, maybe a week, but he promised it would be done. Before I left, I looked him square in the eye. "You remember what Vera used to say about you?" I asked. He grinned. "Still does, probably." She was wrong. She usually is. When I got home, the sun was low in the sky. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car, staring at the house, watching the light fall across the driveway like it didn't know anything had changed. Then I got out, walked straight to the garage, and took a photo of every item that had once been mine, now tagged and boxed and stripped of history. My baby blanket, an old camera, a stack of art projects from students I had mentored. I uploaded it all to a Google Drive folder. Title: Just in case. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up my bank account, took screenshots, cross-referenced withdrawals, saved every document I could find tied to Vera or Tobias. The condo offer, the new locks, the grocery deliveries stopped in my name. I wasn't gathering evidence. I was gathering truth. I added one final document, a blank page with 12 words. "You wanted me silent." Instead, I took notes. Then I closed the laptop, got up from the table, and turned off the kitchen light. They thought I wouldn't notice. They had no idea how loud those notes would echo, and they had no idea how loud those notes would echo. It had been 10 days since I left the hospital, 10 days since I sat across from Tobias in that cafe and watched him offer me a condo like I was a problem to be relocated. 10 days since Luther looked me in the eye and told me, "You were right to call me." Now it was Thursday. The air felt too still that morning, humid and tight, the kind of weight you feel in the South before a thunderstorm. But inside me, there was clarity, purpose. No storm, just a slow, intentional fire that refused to go out. Vera had emailed 3 nights ago. Subject line: Family meeting, final discussion. The kind of title you'd expect from a human resources department, not your sister. It read simply, "Let's bring closure to everything. This doesn't have to be difficult." Friday, 10 a.m., at the house, V. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Luther and I met at his office the next day. I brought the folder I'd been building, and he brought one of his own. Inside it, complaints filed with the South Carolina Bar Association, evidence of unauthorized POA use, screenshots of Vera's charity foundation shifting funds just weeks after I landed in the hospital. He didn't say much that day, just slid the papers toward me and said, "Be clear, be calm, and don't let them confuse you with guilt. They'll try." Now here I was, 10 minutes to 10, standing in front of the house that once held every version of me, daughter, caregiver, afterthought. I was no longer any of those things. I was something new, something final. I walked in through the front door without knocking. They were already there. Vera, seated at the head of the dining table like she'd been crowned. Tobias beside her, fidgeting with his phone. Claudine, our mother, sat straight-backed, arms crossed, pearls nestled tight around her neck. And Harland, my father, leaned slightly in his chair, pretending to read a folded copy of the local paper. The room fell quiet the moment I entered. I didn't say a word. I simply pulled out a chair opposite Vera and placed my folder on the table. Luther followed a moment later, dressed in his usual rumpled shirt and mismatched tie, carrying a small black briefcase. Vera cleared her throat first. "Thank you for coming, Marielle. We just want to resolve things. Peacefully." "Is that what we're calling it now?" I asked. Claudine cut in, sharp and rehearsed. "Let's not be combative. There's no need." Harlan stayed silent. Vera took over. "We understand you've had a difficult time, and it's natural to feel displaced, but we want to find a solution that works for all of us." "Funny," I said. "You didn't seem concerned about that when you changed the locks." She didn't flinch. "You weren't well. We were advised to prepare for all outcomes. And erasing me was the most convenient outcome, wasn't it?" She pursed her lips but said nothing. I turned to Luther and gave him a small nod. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a single document. "Before we go any further," he said, calm and measured, "we'd like to clarify a few legal issues." He slid the paper toward Tobias and Vera. "This is the power of attorney signed by Miss Estine during her hip surgery. As you can see, it was never notarized, never witnessed, and therefore holds no legal authority for the actions you took." Vera's jaw clenched. Tobias looked pale. Luther continued. "Further, we have documentation showing that Mr. Rake accessed Ms. Estine's financial accounts during her hospitalization without consent. And we have proof that personal property belonging to her was listed for sale online from accounts tied to your husband's phone, Vera." Claudine shifted in her seat. I reached into my folder and pulled out 3 photos, my baby blanket, my old sketchbooks, my father's pocket watch, each with a neon orange garage sale sticker. I placed them in front of my parents. "I was still alive," I said, "and this is what you were doing." Vera reached for the papers but stopped halfway. Her hand trembled slightly. Tobias whispered, "We didn't think you'd wake up." "No," I said. "You hoped I wouldn't." There was a moment, one long, hollow breath where no one moved, no one spoke. Then Luther stood again. "I've filed a formal complaint," he said, "with the Bar Association, the Ethics Board, and the Grant Oversight Committee that manages Vera's nonprofit affiliations. We're also initiating a petition to invalidate all property transfers and regain full control of Ms. Estine's accounts." "You can't," Vera snapped. It's done," he said, "and you'll be hearing from them directly." The room shifted. Vera's posture collapsed just a bit. Tobias looked like he wanted to leave. Claudine stared at me, her lips twitching, but her voice silent. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. And then, like fate had been waiting, Luther's phone buzzed too. He checked the screen, showed it to me without a word. Trending. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. A photo of Vera at a recent charity gala. The headline read, "Charleston's sweetheart accused of exploiting sister for profit." I looked back at her. "You were so busy protecting the family's image," I said, "that you forgot something." She raised her eyes, defiant but shaky. "You removed me from everything," I said, "but you forgot the only thing I needed to do, stay alive." I stood. No one stopped me. No one spoke. Luther followed. Behind us, the silence thickened. They were finally quiet, and not because they respected me, because they didn't know what else to say now that the world could hear everything. And staying alive gave me one last decision to make. 3 days passed in relative silence. Not the kind you savor, but the kind that holds its breath, waiting to see who moves next. The media storm came quickly. It started with a whisper, a local blog post titled, "The Disappeared Daughter." Within 24 hours, it had been picked up by a popular regional podcast. A 30-minute segment aired titled, "Power, Paperwork, and Betrayal in Charleston's Upper Circles." They used my name, my story, Vera's name too. And they didn't sugarcoat a thing. "Charleston's sweetheart accused of erasing her own sister," read one caption. The photo they used was from her latest gala, the one where she smiled into the camera in a sapphire dress, hands folded perfectly over a glass of white wine. Now that same photo was paired with pull quotes from Luther's filed complaints and testimonies from former charity staffers who said they'd seen red flags but didn't want to get involved. Vera's calendar was cleared within 48 hours. Events postponed. Board seats re-evaluated. Grant requests rescinded. Her phone, I imagine, must have burned in her hand every time it buzzed. And me? I said nothing. No interviews, no follow-ups. I declined every request from journalists and bloggers with a single phrase: some stories are louder when left untold. Instead, I stayed home, read, walked, sat on the porch and let the world talk while I held my peace like a stone in my pocket. Then, on the third morning, a letter arrived. It wasn't typed. No return address, just my name written in shaky, familiar handwriting. I knew it was Tobias before I opened it. Inside, folded neatly, was a copy of the note I had scribbled in the ICU, the one they found under my water cup. My handwriting was faint, barely legible. It read, "If I don't wake up, please forgive me. If I do, please come. I am scared." In the margins, Tobias had written in blue ink, "We didn't know how bad it was. I thought Vera would go. I thought you'd understand. I'm sorry. Can we try again?" I read it once, then again, and again. I kept that letter in my hand the entire day, never quite setting it down, but never responding either. The next morning, I decided to meet him. We didn't choose a cafe, or the house, or even Luther's office. I asked him to meet me at the cemetery where our grandparents were buried. A neutral place. A place where truth could sit down without being asked to leave. I arrived first. Walked past rows of weathered stones, some tilting from time, and others too new to ignore. I found our grandparents' plot, the granite bench, the twin urns, the tree they planted the year I was born. I sat and waited. Tobias showed up 5 minutes late, carrying nothing but the letter. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, though he did seem thinner. It was more in the way his shoulders slumped, the way he moved like someone unsure if they had permission to stand on the ground they used to own. "Thanks for meeting me," he said quietly. I didn't reply. I let him talk. He took a breath. "I didn't know what to do. When you went into the hospital, it was like the floor dropped out. Vera had everything handled. She said it was best not to crowd you, said you wouldn't remember." "She was wrong," I said. He nodded. "I didn't know you'd get worse. Or better." I didn't want to see you that way. I was scared." "You were scared to watch me get sick," I said. "So you left." His mouth opened, but I kept going. "I didn't need you to be strong, Tobias. I just needed you to be there." He looked at the grass, the headstone, his shoes, anywhere but my face. "She made it sound like it was temporary," he muttered. "Like once you were better, we'd just reset. By selling my things, changing my locks, stripping my name off everything legal?" He winced. "I didn't know about all of that." "You didn't ask," I said. "Because it was easier to pretend everything was being handled." He finally looked at me. "I thought I was protecting myself. I thought I was part of your family." He stepped closer. "I want to make it right." "You can't." "I'll try." I took a slow breath, steadied my voice. "The woman you abandoned in that hospital? She died in that ICU." He swallowed hard. "I survived," I continued. "But you don't know me anymore." He reached out, hesitant. Maybe for a hug, maybe for absolution. I stepped back. Not cold, not angry, just done. He dropped his hand. "I'm sorry, Marielle," he said. "I know." I walked away from the bench, the headstone, the guilt dripping off him like sweat. I didn't hurry. I didn't stumble. I just left. And he didn't follow. That night, back at home, I sat with the letter again. I folded it gently and placed it in a box with a few other keepsakes. A photograph, a ring, a ribbon from my childhood piano recital. Things that still meant something, even if the people around them didn't. I wanted closure, but now I realize I wanted my own beginning more, and I knew exactly where to begin again. It wasn't dramatic. There was no grand goodbye, no final scene in the rearview mirror. One morning, I just packed what I had left: 3 suitcases, a shoebox full of memory, and a heart that no longer begged for closure. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't owe anyone that anymore. The drive down the coast to Georgia was long, but it felt like breathing again. I passed through towns I'd never heard of, watched the landscapes change from the gray stone of Charleston's historic blocks to the softer, greener stillness of a coastal town just south of Savannah. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway of a modest white cottage near the marshes, the sky had turned that watercolor blue-gray that only seems to exist on southern coastlines. A low wind danced through the tall grass. I stepped out of the car, stretched, and for the first time in months, didn't feel like I had to brace myself for what came next. The cottage was simple, nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a porch with chipped paint, a crooked gate. But it was mine, not inherited, not borrowed. Not laced with guilt. Mine. I spent the first week in a kind of quiet rhythm, waking early, brewing strong coffee, walking along the marsh trails with a notebook tucked under my arm. I didn't write much, but I let my mind settle, let it breathe. The town didn't ask questions. They didn't care about last names or social standing. They cared about what time the fish fry opened, who brought the best peach cobbler, and whether you could remember someone's dog's name at the post office. It was enough. I started volunteering at a local art center. Nothing formal, just a few hours a week helping kids and seniors with watercolor. They called me Miss M. I never corrected them. One morning, a little girl named Sadie handed me a painting she made, a tree with deep roots and crooked branches reaching wide. "It's your house," she said. "It's beautiful," I replied. "No," she insisted. "It's strong." That word stayed with me. Strong. It didn't roar. It didn't shout. It just stood. A few days later, I went to the bank and closed the last of the joint accounts. Anything that had once been attached to the name Esteen was severed. I opened new accounts under M.E. Clarion, a quiet tribute to my grandmother, whose journals had been the one voice that reminded me I was never crazy for noticing too much, caring too much. In the shoebox I carried with me, I kept only 3 things. The note I wrote in the ICU, the one Vera and Tobias had nearly buried with me. A photograph of myself as a child, sitting between my grandparents on that same crooked bench where I later told Tobias goodbye. And a page from my grandmother's journal that read, "They may rewrite the story, but they can't erase the witness." I read that line every week. News about Vera still trickled down. After the complaint filings and public backlash, she was fined and barred from holding any official nonprofit position for 3 years. No jail time, of course. That's not how the world works for people like her. But her reputation, gone. Her social circle, ghosted. Her once weekly column in the Charleston Gazette, canceled. Word spread she had moved to Asheville. To heal privately, the press release said. She was still Vera, but now, the mask had slipped permanently. I didn't celebrate her fall. I didn't post about it or toast to her disgrace. Justice didn't need me to throw a party. It had spoken in a whisper, and that was enough. My parents never called, not even after everything. Part of me still waited for it. The phone to ring, my mother's clipped tone, my father's clearing throat. But it never came. And that absence? It stopped hurting. Tobias sent one more letter. I never opened it. It sits, still sealed, in the drawer beneath my socks. A part of me knows I will open it one day, not out of hope, but out of curiosity. But for now, it can wait. Because I've finally stopped needing answers to questions I didn't ask. I never wanted revenge. I never even wanted an apology. I just wanted to be seen. And now, standing in a life I rebuilt with my own hands, I see myself. That afternoon, I returned home after the art center closed. The air smelled like salt and honeysuckle. I unlocked the front door and stepped into a space that finally didn't carry echoes of who I used to be. On the fridge, hung with a magnet shaped like a fish, was Sadie's painting, the strong tree, the deep roots. I smiled and poured myself a glass of sweet tea, sat on the porch, listened to the cicadas, and then I heard it. A small knock at the screen door. "Miss M?" It was Ethan, a boy from my Thursday class, holding a paper plate with a slice of cake. "My mom says thank you for helping with the mural." I nodded. "Tell her I loved every minute." He hesitated, then added, "You're gonna come next week too, right?" I looked at him, his wide eyes waiting. I smiled. They didn't want to call me, I said to myself, but someone else just did. And this time, I'm answering. Sometimes, the people we expect to protect us are the very ones who hurt us the most. But healing doesn't always come with an apology. It comes when we choose ourselves, even if that means walking away from the ones who should have stayed. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up because of your own family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. More real-life family stories are on the way. You won't want to miss what comes next.